Hey guys, today we are going to be real, raw, and eye-opening. How's that for an intro? Today, our guest today is a trailblazer in the entertainment industry, using his talent and creativity to break down barriers and promote inclusivity for the trans community. He's an award-winning writer, producer, and content creator who is unafraid to speak out about the unique challenges faced by trans men in our society, including the impact of misogyny and gender dysphoria. His upcoming young adult fantasy book series promises to be a powerful tool for representation and advocacy, tackling important issues facing the LGBTQ plus community head on. So let's jump right into this, and please welcome with me Kaedyn, voice that needs to be heard and a person who makes amazing content. Kaedyn, how are you?
Ew, I'm so good. I gave you like the worst bio ever and you rewrote it and it sounds amazing. And now I'm using that from now on. So thank you. Thank you. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but I work with MJ every day and I love being on the show. I'm on the show. I'm usually behind the camera. So this is great. I had actually like wash my hair and like shower.
Yeah. So I have to do shout out because best
Yeah.
producer ever. Like, just love
Oh,
you. So
thank
you're like the
you.
best. That's my shout out. I'm doing a shout out
Yeah.
to Prince Kaedyn.
All the beautiful guests you see on the show, that's me.
That is you. Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's jump into this. But before we get into the deep end,
Yeah.
we are going to be talking about terms that people may or may not know, or they not don't know the way that we will be using them. And
Yes.
so I want to make sure that we define some things up front so we're all using the same words. So first of all, super basic. What is the difference between sex and gender?
Well, first of all, I want to caveat and say I am not a doctor. I am not a biologist. So I'm going to try to do a really basic explanation of this. But as science entails, sex is what we are assigned at birth, and
Okay.
it's usually dependent on our genitalia, right? So
Mhm.
chromosomes, genitals. And I think what people don't understand is there's not just two sexes, male and female, there's intersex, there's all sorts of mixes. There are people that have chromosomes that are more female that are actually born with male genitalia. So when we get into this conversation, which we won't today, about biological sex, there are so much more complexities. But essentially, it boils down to your chromosome makeup and the genitals that you were born with. And that's what doctors usually look at you and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and assign this person with this gender because they tie the two together, right?
Okay, so that's the definition we're going to use today for sex.
Yes.
And we've got genitals to look at, and you can go, oh, look under there. That's a boy. That's a girl. Okay.
That's what
Now,
people think, but that's
that's what people think, but that's when we use the word sex, that's what we're going to be talking about. Let's talk about gender now.
Well, gender is a social construct. And what people, again, people usually relate it to biological sex and they don't break the two apart. But it is a gender construct because once you're born and you were assigned a certain sex, it entails assigning a gender along with it. So they're like, okay, this person has these parts. So I'm going to call them male or I'm going to call them female. But what also comes along with those words are so many social constructs down to like how the person should act, what they should look like, their
Mhm.
role in society, what the expectations are of them, what there is that assumed like this is what somebody that has more testosterone in their body is able to do versus somebody that has more estrogen. And again, humans are so complex that we really can't boil us down to these like superficial concepts. And when we're talking about people are like, but biological, yeah, but gender is a construct because again, once you're born, all of these other expectations come along with it. And that's where we get misogyny. That's where we get the homophobia and all of these things because people have expectations that everyone falls into two little buckets, male,
Okay.
female, based on cisgender. Yeah.
Now, you just threw another one we're going to have to define for people: cisgender versus transgender.
So, again, like people will comment, well, there's man, woman, and then there's trans. Like, no, actually, the umbrella is human.
Mhm.
And then there is, male, female. Let's just start with those binary terms again for a moment. There are cisgendered men, For example, these are people who were assigned male at birth who continue to identify and present as male. Again, using binary terms. And the
Mhm.
same goes for trans women, or for women and females, right? Transgender essentially means that there is a mismatch between the biological sex and the sex you were assigned at birth and your gender identity. So all those other things, presentation, who you feel you are, maybe what you wished or hoped or feel that your body should have really looked like. Maybe your chromosomes messed up at the last minute and your soul is like, actually, I'm this. That is a trans person. And that does include non-binary folks as well, because there are people out there that are just like, well, I'm not dealing with this binary system. I'm not dealing with the male, female only buckets. And
Mhm.
they would be essentially considered transgender as well.
Okay.
So
So,
there's an umbrella of like, if you're thinking about men and women, it's like, but then there's cis and then there's trans.
okay, excellent. So that is one of the best, like, slowed down explanations that I have seen. I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and they're like, "It's this," and I'm like, "Slow it down," and I used to watch it like 10 or 20 times. So hopefully everyone understands where we're coming from now. So we are going to talk about specifically today. Well, we're going to start with misogyny, and we're going to go into dysphoria, um, and just overall, dysphoria means not gender dysphoria, but just dysphoria generally.
Well, dysphoria, I mean, I can really only talk about gender dysphoria because that's something
Mhm.
that I suffer with. So I don't want to get into medical terms I'm not knowledgeable of. But
Mhm.
dysphoria is essentially overall a discomfort that you have with something. And when we talk about gender dysphoria, it is very specific. I was assigned this sex at birth, but my identity usually is something different. And therefore, I have a dysphoria, a very uncomfortable feeling that could lead to like mental illness, not mental illness, but a decrease in mental health, a
Mhm.
decrease in happiness and joy in life, because these things don't match. You have a mismatch between your biological sex and your gender identity. And so much discomfort comes from that. But obviously, dysphoria could also refer to cisgender people. They could have dysphoria about a number of different things. But today we're very specifically talking about gender dysphoria.
Okay. And we're also talking about misogyny today. We're going to talk about why we have so much misogyny in the culture and how it affects trans men and trans women. But we're going to talk about trans men today. Um, so, what is your, I guess, feeling about what is your experience with um, misogyny and gender dysphoria?
How long you got, man?
We got time. We
I've
got
been on
some
this
time.
planet for decades. Oh my gosh, I have been on this planet for decades. And that's not to say that people who are younger than me have not experienced this, but it has been a lifetime. So I will start with misogyny. Misogyny is essentially the prejudice against women and femme presenting humans. Now, I want to point out that cisgendered women aren't the only people that deal with misogyny. Trans women deal with misogyny. Cisgendered men deal with misogyny. And obviously, we have the whole non binary community who are not going under the terms male, female, who usually use terms like trans femme or trans masc. And they deal with misogyny as well. Misogyny is basically people who go outside the norms and fight against or work against, whether that is directly or indirectly, just by being themselves, against cisgendered men being the dominant force in the world.
Mhm.
And people from all over the world deal with misogyny. And so I wanted to point that out because it's not just women. It's not just cis women. There are cisgender men who have long hair. There are trans guys like myself who have long hair, who wear makeup. That puts them into a female category in the eyes of some cisgendered men, and therefore they also suffer misogyny. But it's my personal experience has just been lifelong. I mean, I grew up, I lived through the 80s where women had to constantly fight to even be represented, to um, you know, that was a time when I remember working in my 20s and just like, well, I wasn't 20s in the 80s, but like even after that, just growing up and seeing all these movies of women like 9 to 5, right? Where they
Mhm.
were constantly dealing with like sexism in the workplace and sexual harassment and the concept that women are inferior, anything feminine, I will leave it even higher. Anything feminine in this world is seen as weak, is seen as inferior, is seen as not able to like rule or dominate, which is really a toxic masculine mindset, right? And that's where
Right.
misogyny comes from. And this is just something that I've dealt with my entire life. So when I came out as transgender and I refused to play by the rules and cut my hair and be as toxic masculine as possible, I continued to face a certain level of misogyny. It really hasn't changed, I'll be honest with you, since before I came out. It's like still the same.
It hasn't. I read the comments in your TikTok, your Instagram, and I've read other people's comments. And one of the things that comes up often in different hateful forms or whatever is, well, if you're going to look feminine, why didn't you just stay a girl?
Yeah, wow, that is a big topic. Thank you so much for bringing that up because people cannot understand the difference between like you know, being trans and your presentation. So for me, and being trans comes with so many different paths. I cannot cover everybody. For me in particular, I felt that I should have been born in the male body with the
Mhm.
chest, with the parts, all of that. So I have a lot of just gender dysphoria that comes with my physical body. That's why I had top surgery. That's why I'm taking testosterone. That is helping me feel like my true self. But then there's presentation, which is essentially style. It's fabric on your body. It's how you cut your hair. It's wearing makeup. That really has nothing to do with gender. And you can see throughout history how it has changed. Men used to wear makeup. Women used to not be able to wear makeup. Otherwise, they were seen as prostitutes.
Yep.
There were so many different variations throughout history because these things really come down to style. What's the trend? What do people particularly want to present as? What do they want to look at? And that really should have nothing to do with gender. But people still continue to tie the two together. So when they see a guy with long hair, they're like, oh, well, you're just trying to be a woman. But that's not true, is it? Those are two totally different things. So I do deal with this all the time. I also want to note that this comes with the era that you grew up in.
Yep.
I grew up in the 80s. I grew up around rock stars and gods, beautiful, gorgeous men with long, flowing hair. Like, this is who I looked up to when I was growing up.
Yep.
When I looked at men and I was like, wow, I wish I was that. I was looking at these like fabulous mains, right? So I don't have a reference for idols of mine. You know, David Bowie, even he had short hair, but he was glam. All of my references, all of my idols growing up were glam. They had long hair. So
Yep.
of course that's going to influence my style, and it currently does, but that might not be the same as somebody who is like 15. We're all different. We
Right.
all grew up in different eras. So that also has something to do with it.
Right. You got Rat, you got Poison, you got Def
Oh my
Leppard,
god,
and they were
Boy,
all awesome.
the first concert I went to. Are you kidding me? And like Sebastian
Bon
Bach.
Jovi. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
my mom got to touch Sebastian Bach's hair. She like went backstage and I was so jealous of her. And she asked him, like, what do you put in your hair? And he said, Viola. I went out and bought Viola.
Oh my God, that is
Oh
hilarious.
gosh. But these beautiful men. And it was a sign of rebellion,
Mhm.
right? Long hair on men was a sign of rebellion because we know the history of hair, the history of people getting their hair cut. That's not to say short hair isn't gorgeous on
Yeah.
any gender. It really is. It's super sexy, just the same.
So there's a spectrum for cis men and trans men.
Absolutely.
It's and very society expects the let's go with the binary man woman. They
Yeah.
expect men to be more of what they expect a man to be, women to be more of what they expect a woman to be. And let's talk about it from the cis side for a second.
Mm.
And like we've got men who are more feminine than masculine. And what does that mean when you when you look at that? When you look at this man is feminine, what does that mean?
I think it's sexy. No.
Yeah.
It really depends. I mean, what is femininity? It
Yeah.
covers so many different things. A man could have more feminine energy. And I'm not going to try to describe that, but people would usually describe that as somebody that was more compassionate, more empathetic, maybe somebody that was more nurturing, like a Cancer,
Mhm.
astrological sign. They could have more feminine energy. They could have more feminine appearance, like longer hair. They could like wearing makeup. But the thing about men and cis men who were assigned male at birth is that because they did have testosterone in their body, they grew. A lot of them have a height to them. They have a certain jawline. Like there's certain physical attributes that were shaped by their hormones. And so sometimes cis men can get away with that because it's like, oh, but we know what's under his pants. Like we
Mhm.
know that he was born with certain body parts. Whereas trans guys don't get that same leeway because then they're like, oh, but you've got not like it's almost like society will only accept feminine men if they still have a certain masculinity to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and if they don't, then they get majorly bullied. They get majorly made fun of for looking pretty, for looking girly, if they don't have all of these attributes. Like there was a post that I just made about Brad Pitt in the 90s and how he had a photo shoot where he was wearing dresses and somebody
Uh-huh.
out, yes, but they shaved his head. They made sure that he looked as masculine as possible so that when he donned that dress, they knew that he was a man wearing a dress. And
Yeah.
he was trying to be like out of the box, but they made him look as masculine as possible to counter the fact that he was wearing something feminine.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
It's interesting because if you look at what we can't call them dresses or skirts, we have to call them kilts, right?
Yeah.
For the masculine men to wear a kilt, it's like awesome. It's like I don't know where it needs to go. What do you want people to know? Like if we talk about this conversation, we've got misogyny, we've got uh, the prejudices. I'm going to say, what do you want people to know at the end of this conversation about um, dysphoria and masculinity and misogyny and trans men? What do you want to get across?
Absolutely. Well, I don't even think we dove into what trans men really deal with. And so this whole topic came up because I posted a
Mhm.
video about this, and I constantly get comments, mostly I would say from cisgendered women, that tell me like the only reason you're trans is because you're trying to run away from being a woman.
Mhm.
And that's not true. They don't understand that as someone who did present as female for a long time, I dealt with and still deal with all of the things that cis women have to deal with just by existing. Misogyny, as you said when we were chatting earlier, is society based. Like
Mhm.
it's that prejudice against women, it's that prejudice against femininity. I still have to deal with that, but that's not why I'm transgender. I'm transgender because of gender dysphoria, because I have a mismatch between the sex I was assigned at birth and the gender presentation that fits me, which I am going with the binary right now. And maybe I'll change that in the future, but
Yeah.
that's a trans guy. I'm a trans guy. I got top surgery. I want my body to be male. And so that is a desire of mine. That is something that transition is helping alleviate dysphoria. It
Yeah.
actually does nothing to alleviate misogyny unless I decided that I was going to cut my hair and try to look as masculine as possible so that I could pass and not ever be seen as female. That
Mhm.
might help, but that's just not a desire of mine. Like, yes, I'd love to end misogyny. Yeah, we all would. But those are two different things. And I think what I want people to understand, particularly cisgender people, is that when you're talking about these society driven things, you can only talk about them through the lens of what you experience. Cisgender women are experiencing misogyny, they're experiencing sexism. They're not experiencing gender dysphoria and the need and want and desire to transition their body. So therefore, they really can't empathize with that. And so they constantly go to what they can understand and they say, oh, well, you're only doing it because of what I go through. They're pointing to that.
Mhm.
They're centering the trans experience around themselves and they're cisgender people and they don't understand. White people will never understand what it's like to deal with racism
Nope.
ever, ever.
Nope.
You cannot center yourself around something you don't understand. You just have to respect that person and understand that we're going through something that you just don't get, and that's okay. There's fear in that. There's fear in not understanding and not knowing, but it's okay. That's why we have to talk to one another and listen.
How do we get to the point where people accept trans and cis? What do you think is the
I think one of the biggest driving forces around the hatred is politics. The politicians are out there, and there are a lot of emails and letters that the right wing in particular has very specifically targeted transgender people, particularly trans youth, for their political gain. And it's very obvious. There's documents out there that state that they are doing this very specifically for political gain. And so if we have a whole wing of politics out there that are centered around harming people, taking away certain people's rights, we're never going to really get acceptance because they are promoting fear. They're promoting animosity and adversity. The only way we're going to get acceptance is by having fair rights for everyone and by people actually sitting down and listening. Trans people are still like a very small population in America and an absolutely tiny population across the world, at least people that are out, because there's a lot of countries where it's illegal to be trans and it's illegal to be gay. It's illegal to be queer. So we have to think about all the people in the world that want to come out but can't. But until there are no laws against people like this, there is acceptance. That really is going to come down to people not using us for their own political benefit.
Yeah, I think it is about generating fear, the same way that not exactly the same way, but the same way that saying that this book is wrong and we can't think this way. It's like,
yeah,
well, why can't people think for themselves, and why can't people meet? Like, if someone met you and they are meeting you right now, they go, I love Kaedyn. There's nothing not to love about Kaedyn as a person.
yeah.
And it just disturbs me that people don't give, I'm going to just say, in general, gay, queer, trans people the benefit of the doubt and saying, this is a good person. I've never had any problems here.
And I want to point this out is that, again, there are a lot of people out there. You just said it. There's two things here. You said that people don't think for themselves. They have religious myths that they're tied to. They have politics and people shoving fear in their face. So they're listening to the media. They're listening to their religion. They're listening to what their parents might have taught them.
Yep.
And they're not thinking for themselves. But then there are people, because I have many friends that I lost throughout this experience who did love me. But because of their perception and their misunderstanding and their fear of transgender people, they shunned me. They would make comments that were completely inappropriate. Like, people would be like, but I'm sorry, I just don't get, like, they would say, I love you, but XYZ and reason why, like, I shouldn't exist. So even those people, even people that love you, even people that know you and that have known you for years and decades, are still falling under the umbrella of not thinking for themselves. And people don't realize how much of what they believe can be attributed to society brainwashing them. And we all fall into it. We all fall into it.
So what is it that people are afraid of? I mean, it's not like, COVID, you're going to catch COVID and you're going to die. What is it that you think people are afraid of?
I think it's a number of different things. First and foremost, like I can say for cisgendered women, I think many of them are still so afraid of men because of the abuse that society has put them through. I mean, again, misogyny, sexism, like this is a huge thing that humans have been dealing with for thousands of years. And so women are afraid of men, and therefore they believe that because trans women were assigned male at birth, that they're afraid that these are men invading their sacred spaces, and they don't feel safe. Where they're not really understanding the transgender experience. Again, they're looking at through the eyes of a cis person. Like, I'm a cis woman, I've been attacked by cis men, therefore everybody that was born with you-know-whats is going to attack me. And so that's just one example of a fear that I hear all the time. And women will say, well, you're gaslighting our fears by allowing trans women to exist. It's like, but these are two different things. And honestly, we all deal at the end of the day, we all have the same oppressor. We all know who they are.
Yeah.
We all know those people, and it's not just cis men. It's like the people that want power, the people that want to use minority groups and put them against one another. And I think that there lies another fear, is that there will be a loss of power. Cisgender people, heterosexual people, white people,
Mm-hmm.
they will always look at minority groups and say, thank God I'm not them. I would never want to suffer like that. I would never want to suffer oppression. I have some privileges and I'm going to hold onto them come hell or high water. And I think the entire Republican Party relies on getting votes from those particular type of people who are afraid that they are going to fall into a minority. They're afraid that there are going to be more queer people than straight people. They're afraid that the country's going to be taken over by Hispanic and Latino people, which it is absolutely moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And they're afraid that they're going to become the one thing that they're going to lose their privilege, I suppose.
That's interesting because, I hear the argument a lot of times. It's like, oh, don't train our kids this way because they're going to grow up to be, trans or gay or whatever. And I can't really think of, I haven't seen in the media examples of that happening where it's like,
it's rhetoric.
It's what?
It's rhetoric.
Yeah. I don't see it. I haven't seen it.
Let's give another example. When slavery was abolished and Black people were free, the white people gathered together and said, oh my gosh, in some places there's more of them than us. We are going to lose power. Let's go out and make them look terrible so that we can gain as many people on our side. I mean, that's what humans do. They're afraid of being the minority because they know how minorities are treated because they treat people that way. They're afraid of being treated how they treat other people.
Yeah, I feel sorry for the aliens that ever show up here.
The aliens are already like watching from a distance, like, you know what? I'm just gonna not touch that. No, we humans, I think about that all the time, about what a mess we've made of this world. Like, we came onto this planet and we had this beautiful planet filled with resources and sun and nature, and like, what a mess we made with all of our rules and our religions and our politics. And it's such a mess. And it's really, at the end of the day, it is just a system built to keep some people in power so that they can live more comfortably, so that they don't have to fear for their life.
I want people to be able to stay in touch with you.
Yeah.
And they need to keep learning, and I want them to be your friend. I want them to watch your TikToks because they are amazing, by the way.
Yay.
And when I say TikTok, I mean TikTok, Instagram, because that's where you are. So we've got you at Trans Fairy Prince on TikTok and on Instagram.
And this is the main place I want to send people. I'm not on Instagram as much as I am on TikTok, but I do have the Diary of Trans Fairy Prince. And so I go through my entire transition process and I talk about these things all the time, mostly on my TikTok.
Okay. Well, on your TikTok.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll get people over to TikTok. And if they need more, they can look at your linktree.ee/Nedopak. So
yes. Oh my gosh. And I just changed that. Oh, I actually put that link in. I just changed my link tree to Trans Fairy Prince. So if you go to any of my sites, the link is going to be there and it's going to go to Trans Fairy Prince. Just want to let you know.
Well, you are awesome about all that. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
I thank you for being the awesome producer that you are. And
gotta get back to work after this, people. Book some work out.
Oh my gosh. Thanks a lot. And we will see you next time. We're going to do this again.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.